Welcome, everyone, to the Inspirational Business Women Show, where it is my passion and purpose to provide you, the viewer, with a gold mine of inspirational tips, strategies, and advice to help you grow your business from inspirational businesswomen in the know. And today we have such a woman, my special guest, Brenda Kolasa, and we're going to be discussing thriving in your business the Kaizen Way. Now, if you know of someone who might be interested in this topic, please go ahead and help spread the word while I play the preview trailer, and we'll get this interview started in just a minute. Welcome, everyone. I am so pleased you have joined us here today. I know that your time is valuable, and so we appreciate that you're taking the time to learn some valuable information to help you grow your business. So thank you again for being here. Again, if you would help spread the word, we would so appreciate that. Now, today's show is sponsored by hangout-marketing.com, where you can receive a complimentary live stream assessment. Now, why might you want to do this? Well, this assessment will only take you a couple minutes and will help you determine if you are using live stream effectively in your business to help you brand, grow, and market yourself. So go ahead and take advantage of this by texting pound success to 775-800-4179, or if you're out of the US, you can go to hangout-marketing.com to take the assessment. And you might even qualify for a complimentary Shine strategy session with me, where we'll discuss your marketing needs and determine how you can best use live stream marketing in your business. Now, let me go ahead and introduce you to Brenda Kolasa. She is she's the founder of Creative Thinking Solutions and a Kaizen-based success coach. And she's going to be sharing with us today, thriving in your business the Kaizen way. She's going to tell us what Kaizen is all about, where it originated, how it can work in your business so that you can grow a thriving business without overwhelm. And she's really going to discuss more deeply the 3 pillars of Kaizen that work best for business success. So you're going to want to stick around to the very end to learn about this. Plus, she has a very special gift for you. So go ahead, Brenda, come on in and say hi to our audience.
Hello, Virginia. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about Kaizen today.
Yes, and I'm excited to hear about it because I've sort of heard about it a little bit, but not the way you're going to be talking about it today. And so for our viewers, I'm very excited that you're going to really help them understand how it applies to an entrepreneurial style business.
Absolutely. I've been using it for a while now, and I can tell you it works. It really, really works, Virginia.
Yes, and I know you have been in business a lot of years. So let's talk about how you began to incorporate this philosophy into the work that you're doing. Did you have any defining moments that sort of pushed you in this direction?
That's a good question. And I had heard of Kaizen stemming from 2 other strategies that are commonly used in the corporate and manufacturing world, which is Six Sigma and Lean. And they're both used to, all 3 of them are used to solve specific problems. So when I became interested in coaching and I started looking into specific coaching niches, I found one that focused a lot on using Kaizen as a way to help clients to focus on the journey instead of the destination, the end result. So I was really intrigued by this, and I wondered how it can help me to deal with my own limitations that were constantly throwing me off balance. So I dove into it, and I was taught that if you could find unique ways to enjoy and enrich that journey, the goal will ultimately take care of itself, as opposed to this huge thing that we build up so much in our mind and ends up being so stressful, which is why we're so often overwhelmed and we tend to procrastinate so much. Right now, like it seems we're all stressed as a whole right now, and it doesn't seem to matter where we live. So I learned so much during that time and was excited to see if my clients would benefit as much as I did. So it was an eye-opening, I guess, experiment at the beginning. But client after client after client kept commenting on how much they benefited when they started using those Kaizen principles, and how much those principles helped them not only personally but professionally.
I think that's fascinating. And first of all, you mentioned something that I think is really important that we all should just pause and remind ourselves of. And that is, especially as an entrepreneur, we're on a journey, aren't we? And you've got to learn to embrace the journey. That is a big part of the fun of being in business for yourself. Being an entrepreneur is the journey. And of course, we all have great dreams and aspirations for the destination of our journey. But if we don't enjoy the process, we're missing out on some really rich experiences, not all of which might feel positive part of the time, but they're still enriching and they're growth for us. And so I love that you're starting from that perspective, that it is about the journey. So tell us a little bit about, the history of Kaizen, how it originated and where it came from.
Sure. So the term Kaizen is actually a Japanese philosophy and way of life, meaning small steps for continual improvement or change for the better. So way back around World War II, there was a man, an American by the name of Dr. Edward Deming, and he was responsible for a lot of the manufacturing improvements in corporate America around that time. So his concept was that it was everyone's job to make continual incremental improvements in everything that they do each and every day. And he became so well known that he was invited by Japan to come and help them rebuild their manufacturing facilities after they got destroyed during the war as well. So, for instance, Toyota started adapting this philosophy of continuing improvement made through small steps throughout all of their factories. And part of what he taught Toyota was that if they wanted to manufacture great products, each and every employee and leader had to ask themselves one thing each and every day. And that one thing was, what extremely small step can I take to improve the process or the product? What extremely small step can I take to improve the process or the product? And they were to ask themselves that each and every day. So in fact, every factory worker was empowered to actually have an opinion about their area of expertise. Can you imagine? They have an opinion.
I mean, I love that because you're empowering the workers who are ultimately responsible for the production of your product. It makes perfect
Exactly.
sense.
Exactly. So if those employees saw, especially on the factory floor, saw anything that it could improve the process or the product, they were authorized and encouraged to pull the cord, push stop on production, and drag an engineer into the boardroom in order to explain how they could make a tiny change in the process or the car's design that would save 5 seconds on the factory floor. or 3 seconds or 1 second, even 1 second. And those small seconds made all the difference because just little incremental changes like that helped Toyota to rise up from World War II to become a manufacturing superpower. So the Japanese bought into this philosophy that everything can be changed and made more efficient by working as a team, so much that they gave it the name of Kaizen. So fast forward to the mid 1980s when Kaizen made its way back to America. And today, Kaizen is known as a way of life philosophy and mindset based on making those small changes on a continual basis. So no dramatic no dramatic changes, just small incremental continual improvements. And that's basically the history of where it came from.
And I think that that's really fascinating. First of all, that Toyota rose up to be the dominating car manufacturing country as a result of empowering their workers to make suggestions for small incremental change. And I think that says so much for philosophy in general, whether or not it's for a big manufacturing company or it's for a little, and I don't like to say little in little words, but a small entrepreneur who also needs to be empowered to feel like it's not about I've got to go out there and do this big, big, impressive thing to make, to make my mark in the world. It's about, as you're going to explain, I think in more detail, these incremental small steps. And when you come at it from that different philosophy, my feeling is that this must take a lot of pressure off of individuals and the individual workers who are in factories, because they're not asking for something big and momentous. Something small can make a big difference when compounded over time or when compounded by more individuals making suggestions for small change. I love this philosophy, and I'm so glad we're talking about it because it hasn't been discussed on my show before. And I think that it's all good for us to be reminded of some of these principles that maybe were in the background, but not something that was articulated. So thank you, Brenda, for doing that. I really appreciate
Absolutely.
it. So let's go on into the idea of how it does work into business on a variety of scales, not just a small entrepreneur. You've already talked about it on larger business scales, but how do we relate this to businesses that the viewers might be taking part in?
Great. Okay, great. So Kaizen is known to be very effective to help improve one's life and reducing stress on a day-to-day basis. And it really helps to get through that monotony that we face each and every day. But it's also extremely effective in conquering those big goals that we set out for ourselves without the overwhelm and the procrastination that typically happens when we try and tackle these huge goals. And most people try and set those big goals, those big projections. And personally, I mean, New Year's is a perfect example. And what happens? We typically tend to self-sabotage ourselves because we just can't get past our own excuses. The ones that we come up with when we're unsure or resistant or fearful in some way. And that's really why most resolutions and using huge steps to achieve these big goals don't work for most people because they get tossed into what I call the drawer of lost goals. The drawer of lost goals right alongside with all those lost socks.
Yes, all those lost socks. That's beautiful.
So our brain is programmed to resist anything uncomfortable, including change. And so what practicing Kaizen does is it helps to bypass that fear center in our brain called the amygdala. A lot of people have heard the amygdala. It's our fight or flight center in the brain. And we need to bypass that fear area so that we can accomplish what we need and what we want to do. So when that amygdala is activated, when we're in fear mode, when we're uncomfortable outside of our comfort zone, it shuts everything down to the point that we stop thinking rationally about our long-term goals And we look for the quickest way to relieve those feelings of stress, anxiety, and fear. It does this to protect us, don't get me wrong, just as it needed to way back in the day. Caveman days, right? You've all heard of this. We're no longer running from dangerous saber-toothed tigers that want to eat us for lunch as we did back then, and in the way it was intended. So now, when that amygdala senses that we're outside of our comfort zones, uncomfortable or uneasy about something, it wants us to look for the quickest way to relieve those feelings of stress. So that's why we suddenly have a drive to clean the fridge, file papers, or clean the coffee machine that we know we should be really doing something else. We should be focusing on working, on our business, not circumventing, the fear mode, right? That amygdala comes in, it wants to distract us because it's trying to protect us.
I get that, but I've got to jump in here for a second because, part of what you're saying is that we should not. No, I'm sure I'm not. I'm probably misphrasing this. But what I'm getting here is a little bit about when we stretch out of our comfort zone, which I've always encouraged everyone to do, is to stretch out of your comfort zone. You are implying, from what I'm hearing, that this triggers this fight or flight response in the amygdala, and then we distract ourselves to protect ourselves from getting out of our comfort zone. And yet, I have always been under the impression that the best growth for an individual is when they do stretch beyond their comfort zone. So we have a little bit of a conversation, I think, here to have around this whole idea, because I have a feeling where you're going with this, but I just had to point this out. What about this comfort zone? Don't we need to stretch a little bit?
Yes, and thank you for pointing that out. Stretching outside of our comfort zone is so important in the growth of our business. The problem is, though, is that if we take too many leaps outside of our comfort zone, it sends off that fear alert in our brain. And what we end up doing is procrastinating. So we procrastinate because we don't understand it. We don't know how to get through it. We're overwhelmed. We become stressed. And so we need tools. We need strategies to deal with it so that we can get through that uncomfortable part. But once we get through it, wow, like we grow at an unbelievable rate. So my job with my business clients is to help them to avoid that chaos so that they can gain momentum on those goals and those projections and help them move forward with more clarity, focus, and ultimately more enjoyment occurring from the process. And I do that through a few techniques that I've learned that we're going to talk about.
Okay, so I'm really understanding. You don't want them to push to the point that it feels overwhelming and therefore creates sort of a chaotic response pattern, because now they're distracted. The body is saying, wait, that's too much for me. I'm an overwhelmed. So I'm going to go, as you say, clean the fridge.
That's right.
Oh, dear. And yet I will say that from time to time, I do need to get up from my computer. So going and cleaning the fridge isn't bad either.
No. And it's deliberate.
Yes, there you go. That's really the point, isn't it? That when you don't put yourself into overwhelm, then the actions you take are deliberate and intentional and well thought out. And that's when you make the greatest progress. And I'm thinking that's what Kaizen is about, and the incremental process, the small little steps that keep you on track without the overwhelm. Have I got this right?
That is perfect. That is exactly right.
All right. So I know that our viewers are going to be looking for practical tips and ways to apply this philosophy in their own business, because I know it's very common to move into a state of overwhelm when you are an aspiring entrepreneur that wants to grow their business. So I know you've got some, what do you call them, pillars that you want to share with us?
Yeah. So I have basically 3 pillars that I talk about: small actions, small questions, and small thoughts. So just to give a bit of a backstory, a professor and doctor by the name of Robert Morey, I can never get his last name, Maurer,
Okay.
helped to bring Kaizen to the world as we know today, and wrote the book. Well, he's written several small books, um, but one book he wrote in particular is called One Small Step Can Change Your Life, the Kaizen Way. And it all started after he examined how Kaizen helped Japan come out of that, you know,
Devastation.
yeah, that devastation. And he started wondering if it could help his patients do the same thing to help them with their goals, their personal goals. So he talks a lot about using Kaizen in different ways and different strategies. And the first one that he basically talks about is by using small actions. So considering that Kaizen is so goal oriented, Dr. Maury started asking his patients to start taking incredibly small steps to make any large changes affecting their lives. Steps that were almost ridiculous. They were almost laughable. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. For instance, instead of telling his client to go to the gym and exercise for an hour if they wanted to lose weight, he would tell them to simply march in front of the TV for 1 minute during a commercial. If a patient,
So simple.
how simple, right?
Yeah.
If a patient wanted to cut out caffeine out of their diet, he would tell them to take one less sip a day. One less sip. His patients couldn't think of any reason not to do it, not to take those steps, because they seemed so easy and without any effort at all. So with repetition, he discovered that over time, these small steps produced huge results, and his patients were succeeding by their own intuition big time. So by taking small actions or small steps, what you effectively do is you're hacking, you're rewiring your nervous system so that it frees you from things like creative blocks, fears, and anxiety. And it does this by simply bypassing that fight or flight response and creating new connections between those neurons so that the process towards your goals or your goal is way more efficient, simply because there's no more excuses, no more resistance. So in essence, those small steps, they help both personally and professionally to improve a habit, a process, or achieve a goal that was once too big to wrap your head around. And that's what small actions and small steps is all about.
I think this is just so interesting because I'm using the example of if you wanted to write a book. That is a big project. It takes some people years. I have one client I know that took 8-9 years to get a book published. And so that is an idea around these huge goals that are important goals to you and yet can feel overwhelming. So I'm just curious how you work with somebody to help them know what the small steps might be, because they might be breaking it down saying, I'm going to do a chapter this month, and that might feel like a small step. But I'm wondering, based on the Kaizen philosophy, is that small enough?
Right. So good point, because 99% of my clients think they're doing these small steps, but yet they're not doing them. So they're procrastinating. They're still getting overwhelmed. And I say, if you're still getting overwhelmed, they're not small enough. Break it down even more, chunk it down even more until they're laughable, until it's a no-brainer. Nothing.
So what would be an example of that you would do with one of your clients? How would you find what is the correct smallest step?
Okay, so I'll give you an example that I dealt with, that I continue to deal with. I hate paperwork. I am a right-brained person, creative. So when I see a stack of paper starting to build, it throws me into overwhelm. I don't want to do it. It's not my thing. I start thinking about all the time I'm going to have to give up to file all this. I procrastinate big time. So how I originally started thinking about this after, I took my training was, how can I use Kaizen to file my papers? How can I use that philosophy? So a couple things I came up with is, one, can you do 5 sheets today? Can I do 5 sheets? I can definitely do 5 sheets. 5 sheets is nothing. Or if you don't want to do that, you do a time frame. Can you do 5 minutes? 5 minutes is nothing. Of course I can do 5 minutes. There's a lot of self-talk happening here.
I hear that.
So in essence, after you do 5 sheets, 5 minutes, whatever it takes, you feel successful because you actually did what you said you were going to do. Versus, I'm going to this Saturday take the day and I'm going to file that big stack no matter what. Well, Saturday comes and you end up only doing an hour because company comes or the phones don't stop ringing or your kids are after you or this or that or that. If you only did 1 hour when you meant to do a full day, are you going to feel successful? You're not.
Right.
You're going to feel like a failure. So this way helps you to feel more successful, more empowered, and it creates that momentum for the next day because now you're getting comfortable. So when we're comfortable with something, we're no longer outside of our comfort zone, and it just happens naturally. We go from 5 minutes to 10 minutes or 5 sheets to 10 sheets to 30 sheets because we gain that momentum.
Oh, and the momentum is critical. I mean, I'm going to pause here for a moment because I really feel this is a pack your bag moment. You know what I mean by those moments where if you're listening and you got this, you got enough out of this to really work with all the philosophy that Brenda's sharing with you. But don't leave because Brenda's got a great gift for you in a little bit. But here's what I want to sort of paraphrase about what you're saying is, when you ask yourself the question, this seems to be the key to me. You ask yourself, can you file 5 sheets today as an example? And if your body comes back and, well, that's ridiculously easy, of course I can, you know you found the small incremental step that you can do that's going to lead to a feeling of success and therefore start to build the momentum. Ask yourself the question, and only you are going to know what the right answer is, because for you, maybe 5 sheets is too many. Maybe you have to start with 1, and only you're going to know the answer to that. Am I onto something here?
You are. And there's other ways to use small questions as well, because they can be extremely powerful for generating ideas and solutions as well as creating change. Our brain loves a challenge, and it'll never reject a chance to figure something out, to come up with solutions, as long as it's not so big that it triggers that fear response.
So that kind of takes us into the next pillar, doesn't it? Around the questioning.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the area of our brain that's responsible for memory is called the hippocampus, right? And it works best through repetition. So by asking small questions repeatedly, it gives the brain no choice but to pay attention and to start come up with logical answers. So I'll give you an example. If I'm looking for specific ideas or solutions, I like to ask a small question before I go to bed at night. I'll write it down and then I'll ask it in the morning. I'll repeat it. As an example that I've used before is, what can I do to generate more social media engagement? I've also asked questions such as, what content can I put into my new program to make it unique? And typically, I get these aha moments, these incredible aha moments. But the problem is they typically come to me in the shower. So I am so smart in the shower.
So you need a recording device right outside it, or an Alexa or something like that, so you can get it down.
Exactly. So I began to keep a pad and pen in every room in the house as well as in my vehicle, because those thoughts come and go, and the older you get, they're gone very, very quickly. So those small questions are great when you're looking to make a change in your life as well. The brain hates being told what to do. Just to give you, an FYI, typically we tend to tell ourselves that we need to get more clients, or we need to be more productive, or we need to make more revenue. But the problem is when we tell ourselves, things like this, we're going to get resistance almost every single time. If you can picture that little kid inside of you crossing her arms and shaking her head, that's what our brain can be like. That is not going to happen. You're not going to tell me what to do. so, so instead, what we need to do is ask ourselves, what could I do differently today that will help to reach out to more people? Or what's the smallest step I can take to be more efficient? So these are gentle questions that we can ask ourselves to keep that amygdala asleep and to train the brain to start thinking for natural and intuitive ways to help. It wants to help. It doesn't want to be told what to do. So we get to be sort of like a parent tippy-toeing around that kid so that we don't wake them up screaming, right? Notice, by the way, I didn't mention any why questions. So what, who, when, and how are all great questions to ask ourselves in a simple and positive way. But typically, if we use why questions, they tend to be more negative, and we tend to berate ourselves and wallow in self-pity. Why do I suck? Why am I not successful? Why didn't I get the contract? So instead of asking questions like that, instead ask, what's one thing I can be proud of this week? Who can I reach out to that can mentor me so that I can grow more? And that's the beauty of small questions.
The beauty and the power of it, because again, what instead of making declarative statements or should statements, I should be doing this to get more clients, as an example, you are turning it into, as you call, gentle questions, probing questions that are opening up what I would call your subconscious realms of creative problem solving, which is probably why sometimes it comes to you in the shower, because it's when you least expect it, right?
Exactly.
But how valuable to recognize this, because I think we're probably, as entrepreneurs and small business owners, we're probably always on the side of making declarations or establishing, the next want or the need that you need to do. I need to do this. I want to do this. I should be doing this. When, as you say, it puts that resistance out there because it's feeling a little overwhelming. Everything comes back to overwhelm, doesn't it?
It does. It truly does. It's incredible how much power that has over us.
So these questions, I think we need to be reminding ourselves. I use that term a lot, reminding ourselves that when you make some of these declarative statements that just don't feel good, that you can feel that resistance, bubbling up inside you, ask yourself, how can I reframe this statement into a question? I would think that would be helpful.
It is so helpful. And you know what? You'll find that you'll get most of your aha moments when you're in that creative phase, right? When you're in the shower, when you are driving a vehicle, when you're having a bath, going for a walk. That's when you're at your most creative self. And that's when you'll get those aha moments, when your mind is sort of numbed. It's taking a breather.
Yeah, that's what I call you're creating space in your thoughts.
Absolutely.
Letting the chatter, sort of fade into the background, or what I would call put it on the back shelf for a while.
Yeah,
and just
I
and
believe
just
it's
chill.
called alpha mode. Yeah, I think it's called alpha mode. When
you're in alpha mode. Alpha mode, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love this. I love this conversation. This is one of those interviews I will be going back and listening to several times, because you've got so many gems in here, Brenda. And I'm looking forward to all of your response to what Brenda's sharing with us. So make sure you let us know what your questions are, what you're thinking about. Are these aha moments for you? Let us know. We'll be responding to each and every one of your comments. But to keep things moving forward, I also want you to bring up that third pillar, because I know it's equally important. You had said something to me about these are the three, that there's more pillars than this, but these are the three that you have found have been the most effective for business people, correct?
Well, for my clients especially, absolutely.
Okay. So let's go ahead and go into that third pillar and let people know what it's all about.
Sure. So that third pillar that I teach is all about small thoughts. So we've covered small actions, small questions. Now, small thoughts are great to help overcome resistance as well. Small thoughts can help to increase sales and prepare for an upcoming date, competition, or difficult and uncomfortable situations as well. So many times, focusing on a few small changes in the words that we use, those words that run through our minds, can make a significant difference to the outcome. And by rehearsing and practicing what you want to say to a potential client, as well as what you would say to yourself, especially when faced with rejection, can provide an opportunity to remain available to serve that client while being encouraging to yourself as well. I hope I made that sort of clear. But an example could be, thoughts such as, keep going, you've got this. Don't worry. A no doesn't necessarily mean that the door's closed. You are being so courageous. There are people just waiting to hear from you because they truly need your services or your product. Basically, they end up becoming really powerful affirmations to repeat and empower ourselves with. So that's one way to use small thoughts. The
I
second
love
way,
those. And I think that that's another thing we need being reminded of is that these are what I would call encouraging thoughts. So they're small, but they're encouraging. They're more positive. You say affirmative statements, but I think they're even more than affirmative statements. They're just, again, little reminders. You've got this. You're being courageous. Keep going. Everything's working out fine. That moves to me beyond even an affirmation. It's just, I think of it as the best parent in the world encouraging you to keep going. You've got this. You can do this.
yeah, so a lot of times I ask my clients, what would you say to a friend going through this? What would you say to that friend? That's what you need to tell yourselves, right? You need to be your own best cheerleader. You need to do that so that you can kick any negative inner critic to the curb. You need to kick that critic to the curb, and you need to basically tell it who's boss. And the way you do that is by being, like I said, your own cheerleader, your own best friend, and really taking those steps to encourage yourself. So the second way that we can use small thoughts is through mind sculpture. And mind sculpture is really interesting. It's a really powerful technique where we're actually imagining what we need to get through. We're imagining. So I did mind sculpture in order to prepare for this interview, believe it or not. And it only takes a minute each and every day. And it's powerful. So it can help you again to prepare for a competition, something that you're nervous about, like if you're going on stage giving a presentation, or you're meeting somebody for the first time, you're going out on that blind date. So it takes advantage of cutting neuroscience basically, and just requires us to pretend that we're actually engaged in the action with all of our senses. So it is a little bit different than visualization. Visualization is only using that one sense. You're only visualizing, you're seeing what's going to happen. But with mind sculpture, you're feeling it, you're hearing it, you're sensing in every different form how you're going to do it, and you're preparing that way. Not only are you preparing for the positives, but you're also preparing for the negatives. So a lot of athletes, competitive athletes, will do this. I don't know whether they call it mind sculpture or not, but I know I was
Yeah.
told Mike Phelps does this.
I read about this years and years ago, and that actually research had shown that the athletes that spent more time with what you're calling mind sculpture than they did in actual training performed better because they weren't wearing their body out. You have to obviously work to a certain extent to build the neuromuscular response that you need to perform well. But I thought it was very interesting. This research was done, I think, back in the 20s or 30s, that better performance came from more mental than physical training. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So
absolutely. And what happens is that the more you repeat this process beforehand, the more it builds into muscle memory. So your brain doesn't know after a while what's real and what's not real. So I'll give you an example that I was told. Mike Phelps does this, and he did this before his big competition at the Beijing Olympics. And he rehearsed what could go right, what could go wrong. And what happened, if you remember, during the Beijing Olympics, is that he ended up getting water in his goggles. Normally, any other competitor, that would have sidetracked him, that would have cost him seconds. But because he had already prepared for this, he knew exactly what to do. It didn't get him off guard. It didn't take him for a loop or surprise at all. And he ended up actually winning gold in that Olympics. So this can be a really super powerful strategy to use, especially if you're up against something that you're extremely nervous about, or something that is so, so important.
Well, my question is, I don't doubt what you're saying. I think it's very important to do I used to call it mental rehearsal, but mind sculpture, I like that. It's juicier. My question is, though, a minute? How does one get to sensing all 5 of our senses, imagining what could go right or what you'd like to go right and what could go wrong in a minute's time? That's a pretty good trick. Do you have any tips about that?
Well, a minute is really a long time in your mind. So I've done this when I've had to talk on stage. I'm still nervous talking on stage, but I push through it. So the night before and a couple nights before, I'll mind sculpture it, and I will see myself walking into the room. I will see all of the people sitting in their seats. I will feel my steps walking through the room, up the steps, onto the stage. I'll try and smell what the room smells like, right? If in a competitor's situation, you're smelling that pool, that chlorine. And I'll actually try and feel my muscle after taking the microphone. And I will use all my senses, and it doesn't take long. Even if you do it for 1 minute, 2 minutes, you're going to repeat that. And sooner or later, you don't have to spend as much time on that aspect, and you move on to other aspects of your talk or whatever you want to do. For me, it's, how do I not stumble over my words? Because I tend to do that, without having anything in front of me. And so I tend to want to rehearse that more and more and more. And it just becomes easier and easier, to the point where once I'm on stage, it feels like I'm really comfortable after a bit. After a minute or two, it takes me a minute. But after that, I tend to feel really comfortable, and it's like nothing.
Yeah, I imagine that's just because you have rehearsed it enough so that it starts to feel familiar. And you've already sort of pre-programmed your response patterns so that everything calms down faster. Because, of course, we all understand that speaking is the number one fear people have. So it takes a little bit of rehearsal, I'm sure. These, Brenda, are amazing, amazing tips. And I know that our viewers are getting so much benefit from this. Please go ahead, keep your comments coming. We love hearing from you, and we will be responding to each and every one of them. Now, listen, I promised you that Brenda had something very special for you, and I'm excited to share that with you right now. So here's what I'm going to do. Brenda, I'm going to put the link up for people, and as I do that, and I will read the link out as well for those who are just listening. But as I do that, would you please go ahead and tell them what is in store for them with this special gift?
Yeah, thank you, Virginia. So basically, it's called Crushing Your Small Business with Kaizen. And it outlines everything we talked about today. And on the end of it, I've included a crushing your goals through Kaizen worksheet. So it breaks it down into weekly goals and daily goals, daily small steps. And so that's included with this booklet download. It's about, I don't know, about 9 pages, something like that. And it outlines so much of what we talked about today so that you've got it in front of you, and you've got those worksheets as well.
Oh, it sounds absolutely wonderful. I know I'm going to be downloading my copy. So if you want a copy of this from Brenda, it's very easy to get it. Just go to hmtips.com/Brenda gift, hmtips.com/Brenda gift, and it'll take you right to the gift. Well, Brenda, I want to thank you so much for being here today. As I say, I think you've just provided us with a wealth of tips. And you know what I love about what you're sharing is they are so doable. A lot of this is just a process of reframing and shifting habits slightly, right? Small incremental steps. I'd love for you to leave our viewers with a final thought. I mean, a final, if you think of nothing else about what I've shared with you today, please make sure you take this idea home with you. What might that be for our viewers?
Thank you, Virginia. I guess, you know what, as a final thought, if it's overwhelming you, if you keep procrastinating, it's not small enough. It's not small enough. Get somebody to help you with that. Get a coach, get somebody, a friend, to break it down if you need to, so that it's not going to stop your progress, right? You want to keep that momentum going. So keep it small, keep it laughable, and have fun with it. Have fun.
That is a great final thought. Thank you so much, Brenda. And all of you joining us live or in replay, thank you for taking the time. I know you found this time today valuable. We'd love to hear from you. So keep those comments coming. And we'll see you on the next Inspirational Business Women Show. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Thanks so much for watching today. Do you know someone who would be a great guest for our show? Or would you like to be a guest on the Inspirational Business Women Show? Let's shine the spotlight on your expertise. We'll share your story while offering tips, strategies, and advice to our viewers. Expert interviews are a great way to build your reputation as the go-to expert. Go to shinetips.com/IBWS to apply today. Women are waiting for your message, and I can't wait to interview you.